Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us today. We are thrilled to be back with you at Hospitality Talks, discussing all issues related to our beloved industry. Hospitality technology, which our session today will be focusing on, may be the most amazing transition to have occurred for the industry over recent years. The widespread adoption of new technology in the industry has fundamentally reshaped the way services are rendered or received. Technology has helped speed up operations and help make the journey more efficient and possibly more enjoyable, even though jury is still out whether it's working or not, and we will talk about that today. Having said all that, there are only few industries that are grappling with the complexities of technologies that our industry deals with. They are diverse, they are different for different operations, different facilities, and a lot of different people specialize on different sections of this industry. No wonder it is a very challenging area to navigate through. And also, it is not surprising that as a result, frustrations and failures are very often experienced. Our esteemed panel today will help us better understand the impact of digital transformation on hospitality industry and how do we transition from possibly a data-rich to an information-rich industry. I'm Abid Bhatt. It's glad to be here with you on Hospitality Talks, and I'm here with my co-host, Sam-Erik Ruttmann. Sam.
Thank you, Abid. I'm really excited about this show. It's going to be a cool show because it's about tech, which I really enjoy learning about, and I'm curious about the developments because since you and me, when we started our careers, we have gone from telex to telefax and internet search, and now it's all mobile devices, which are not a device anymore. It's a solution or if you to solving to a problem. And now we're talking about the digital transformation, which is really it's a huge topic. I mean, I wrote down somewhere that the entire customer experience must be at the heart of digital transformation. And if I look at some of my fellow colleagues in the hotel industry, at what point they are in with their hotel in this transformation, I hope they're watching this show because I'm sure they can pick up a few ideas here, what they would need to catch up on. So with further ado, so if you can invite the panel and let's start the conversation.
Yes, please. Let's bring our panelists in and a brief introduction for our panelists that are joining us today for the discussion. First and foremost, Shane O'Flaherty, who is the Global Director for Travel, Transportation, and Hospitality with Microsoft. He is primarily focused on hotels, airlines, car rental, cruises, and logistic industries, everything to do with our industry in driving innovation that will enhance the customer and employee journey. So not only that it is guest-facing, it's also internally, how do we use technology and how do we increase productivity? Shane, thanks for being with us. Welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thanks for having me.
Our second guest, Jordan Hollander, who's Chief Executive Officer with the Hotel Tech Report. He is the co-founder of this portal, which is the #1 ratings and review platform, helping the industry find best technological solutions and software to run their business. As Jordan had said, for those of you who don't know what Hotel Tech Report is, it's sort of like Yelp for technology. Jordan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me a bit.
And last but not least, Stuart Greif, who is Executive Vice President, Innovation and Strategy with Forbes Travel Guides. Stuart has a long track record in the travel and hospitality industry, leading the strategy of organizations. he has a great knowledge and experience with intersection of tech platforms and how they interact with customer experience, enhancing that experience while driving profitability and operational growth. Stuart, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you kindly, Abid and Sam. Great to be here.
So, gentlemen, if it's okay, I'm going to start with Shane, and we'll have you come up to the stage in a couple of minutes. But Shane, if you don't mind, lead us out of this conversation talking about what are some of the innovations, recent innovations in the industry that have impacted hospitality.
Well, I mean, I think as you move forward, I mean, technology in general, of course, when you look at different industries in the marketplace, I think McKinsey has the hospitality industry is probably the second least automated space. So of all the different verticals. So the idea of how do we automate the space? How do we bring cloud technology to the forefront that allows our systems to actually talk to each other, which today it's like a little bit of a spaghetti mess on the back end. So using cloud technology, using AI to drive this kind of frictionless travel, contactless travel for the customer experience, I think is probably the most prominent push in the marketplace. And how do we do that to drive kind of where high tech and high touch, how do we find that kind of bridge there where those opportunities meet? But I think in the last 9 months, we've probably seen, or 12 months, a rapid transformation of the industry and investment in technology across all industries. We call it COVID speed. It's kind of broken the back of going slow, and we were seeing companies now move very fast, both from a strategic perspective and then both from a tactical perspective, to use technology to drive more operational efficiency, to do more with less, and then ensuring that the customer feels comfortable in their journey and can utilize the technology in a way that's useful and relevant to them to drive, I would say, a little bit more of a contactless experience moving forward. But it is that, and Abidi, I think we talked about it, it's that high touch, high tech. How do you bring those together? And how do you really keep the customer at the center of the journey and then move back in slow motion on what technology, as an example, that you can utilize that will help drive that more personalized experience for the consumer moving forward. So lots of white space, lots of opportunity for the hotel space, and then travel in general across the entire spectrum of the airline, hotel, transportation side.
So COVID certainly pushed the industry to implement some of the new technology, possibly mostly public health issue driven, where the consumer wanted touch-less technologies available. Generally speaking, as you have mentioned, and as McKinsey's report speaks, this industry continues to lag in technological adoptions. Can you talk a little bit about that as to why that is, and what is it that we're missing, generally speaking?
Well, it's interesting because I've always been on sales, marketing, operations, customer experience measurement, training, kind of on that side of the space. And been in the industry for 25 years. And ironically, as working in the hotel space and training hotels, looking at the operations, I actually thought it was pretty good, on the back end side. And then fast forward, about 4 or 5 years ago, I joined Microsoft, then learned about technology, then learned about what's happening in space, learned about cloud technology, AI, and all those types of, I guess, buzzwords you hear in the space around data. And it's funny, then I went and did a day in the life of a hotel probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm like, oh no, this is not good. So it's the lens that we're looking through. How can we drive, using technology, drive more with less? And so it kind of fundamentally starts at, I kind of have a triangle. So it starts at the data layer. So understanding all your data, which is your customer data, your operations data, your employee data, and then understanding as you layer up then around the building that you have. So it's all around developing a smart hotel, which is essentially a hotel in the cloud where all the systems talk together, whether it's hybrid or all in the cloud. So you have real-time visibility in what's happening, both from a telemetry perspective at your property, in addition to what the guests are doing at your property. And then you layer that up into the employee side. So all that information has to lead up to your employee. who we want to have basically information at their fingertips. And then finally, up at the top, around the customer journey, to ensure that if all these layers are done correctly, then that customer journey will be more personalized, more continuous, and a kind of a long-term customer journey, as opposed to kind of a flash in the pan. I think as an industry, we focus a little bit more on the customer side from a technology perspective, and I think underneath it, we've not focused as much as we should have on the employee technology, because employees are using texting, Facebook Messenger, they're using WhatsApp, they're using all these consumer-based tools to drive more efficiency in their job, but then that brings on data security problems. So, and now the hotel industry is starting to catch up in that. So it's really just trying to relook of the frame, and then also the business side and the IT side of these organizations really working hand in hand to drive adoption and to drive, ultimately what's around the corner, and how do we get there, and how do we make our systems on the back end flexible enough to do that. And we need to take our 20, 30, 40-year-old system, we need to revamp the entire thing and bring it to the cloud.
Well, Shane, you bring up a very good point, where in absence of commercially viable, purpose-built technology for hotel industry or travel industry, the associates are using what is consumer-based technology. But if the customer resides in those environments and on those platforms, is there something wrong with hotels adopting that, but also being able to protect the data and security issues?
Yeah, I think the idea is really ensuring that your data is protected and it's inside your enterprise platform. So communication collaboration tools that are out in the marketplace, we have Teams as an example as our communication collaboration tool. If you think of this airline space as a tangential space, I mean, they're using Teams as a collaboration communication platform to ensure that all the data is together to help turn their planes around quicker. When a plane lands, it figures out the tail number, it spins up a group in real time, and everyone above the wing, below the wing is talking together in real time. But all that data is secure. So if you then flip it in the hotel industry, not as mature around the communication employee collaboration tools, the data escapes, and that's where issues happen. And that's probably the most important issue related to hotels. And we've seen breaches in the past and in different areas, but is ensuring that all the data that you have is secure, it's private, and how do we ensure that that happens long-term for the protection of the hotel and its employees as well.
So Shane, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the new initiatives, what's coming down the pike, because technology is evolving so fast. For average person, it can spin your head. And next, one day you think you understand it, and next day your whole world has changed. What's coming down the line, and how can we prepare for that?
Well, I think the concept of, and I think we see in the marketplace around these bots, which are computer assisted kind of automation. So we have those exist in the marketplace, both on the employee side and the consumer side, because consumers want questions answered, what generic question answers. They want everything automated. And again, each level of consumers, multi-generational consumers in different generations, maybe the older generation still wants to pick up the phone. So how do we have that? And the younger generation wants to order food through their mobile device and have it delivered anywhere they're at in the hotel. So I think as you move forward, the continuous automation, but then how do you use the data? How do you then add in AI tools or cognitive services tools that can help make it a better journey? For example, if ultimately long-term, we see you walking up to check in at a hotel, you may walk up to a screen and may have what we call an embodied agent, which is like a caricature of what that hotel embodies in a humanized version. And then you can walk up and says, "Hey, Mr. O'Flaherty, great to see you. We're excited. We've been waiting for you. Well, did you like me to check in? Can you show me your ID?" And you can just put your ID up like that, and it takes a picture. Put your credit card up, it takes a picture. And then it would ask the question, do you need an escort to your room? Short answer is yes. And then the embodied agent would leave the digital screen and then jump onto your phone. And so your AI agent of the hotel then would be talking to the AI agent of me, which is my own kind of artificial intelligence assistant. And they're talking together, really navigating my journey on my behalf, because my AI agent knows exactly who I am and all my kind of 360 profile of myself. And then I'm going to permission these brands into my world. So the idea long-term is the consumer is going to own their information and have their own AI assistant. And then that's going to communicate with the AI assistant of the hotel, in addition to the humanized version, the human, of course, because you still need that human touch everywhere. And if the AI agent can't answer the question, it's going to pass it over to, let's say, the front desk person to answer the question. So how is AI-enabled technology going to drive a more contactless experience? But at the same time, we still need to find that balance between, high tech and high touch moving forward.
Yeah, in hospitality, it definitely has that issue. It's been a very high touch environment in a lot of people that are willing and able and ready to deliver the service, and technology should facilitate that. But most of the time it's missing, or if it's there, it's finding that a fine balance. Shane, I'll turn it over to Sam here in a second, but just in terms of emerging markets, we talk about technology from mature markets where there is infrastructure available. Having done business and operated hotels in emerging market environments where infrastructure might or might not have been the best, the support might or might not have been the best, language becomes a barrier. How do we implement some of these technological solutions in those environments?
Well, I think you'll see more and more of the tech companies investing in those areas of the world, and that technology will continue to grow, and that ability to take something from the ground floor. And technology is much cheaper than it was in the past. And when you think of cloud compute technology, you pay for what you use, as opposed to the infrastructure of your on-prem solutions, which are paying CapEx all the time. So really that idea, how it can flex up and flex down from a technology perspective, I think is important to drive overall operational efficiency. And that ability to drive a better experience for the consumer, I think is, you now have the ability to do that kind of across the board. And then with 5G coming as well, I think the proliferation of technology and Wi-Fi, across the world will continue to grow. So it's really, how do I embrace it? How do I utilize it best for my business? What's the low-hanging fruit, over the next 12 months that drives revenue? And then how do I automate the back end of the process? But if you think of a hotel as a whole, I think hotels do a good job of marketing to consumers before they show up. And then when a consumer's on property, it's pretty much a self-service digital environment, but that's the space that the hotel actually owns. So how does the hotel provide a digital connection with me and content with me during my journey to make my journey a better journey and to drive more ancillary revenue? But that white space beyond a mobile key that checks in, how do they digitally connect with me on property from a personal basis to make my journey a better journey? And I don't think hotels do that at all today. And that's really the white space of opportunity for them, not only inside the hotel, but then also I want you to curate my journey outside the hotel to certain spots again. And, you bring into kind of health security protocols. And, so we do think as you move forward, the business traveler will be more curated in their experience, because I don't think they'll be going to cities anymore. Some people will, I will, of course, and just go wherever you want to go, but other people will want to ensure that wherever they go, the health security of that establishment and the protocols are being followed to ensure that I'm safe and comfortable when I travel too.
Fair enough. That's a great thought, and I'll come back to you in a minute. Let me turn it over to Sam at this point. Sam.
Yes, very interesting conversation so far. I'm always so surprised how certain disruptive industries are taking leaps and ahead of the hotel industry. I'm thinking of Airbnb and Uber and so on. What are they doing from the start much differently? Is it just a startup company and they just start fresh? Or is it something else that they have in their mindset, how they operate compared to hotels that are a little bit slow in pacing into this?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because I've heard the terminology big eats small, but fast eats big. And I think when you look at these companies, they natively built, they're probably in the cloud. So there's lots of flexibility there. But, I don't know how many data scientists that Airbnb has, but I'd probably say it's over 100 to 200 to 300, while a large chain may have 20. So they're constantly looking at the data and the KPIs associated with the data. And then they're using, I would say, deep learning and AI-enabled solutions to drive, I would call more of a digital decision than a subjective decision. And I think in the industry as a whole, we still make many subjective calls. And I think you have to ensure that as you bring all your data together and create a kind of a data lake, is allow the AI to reason over the data. You can ask questions that you may have not thought of before. And if you think of Uber, when you're at the airports, I mean, they're again using the algorithms behind to say, when should this car leave, and when will this person arrive? And they're using AI-enabled algorithms to get there using machine learning models. So it's using your data in a very intuitive way, but then taking advantage of all the ML, all the AI solutions out in the marketplace to really understand your data better and be less subjective. You still have to be subjective, but I think the machine learning tools can get you here, and then you have to make a call at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you in there. The interesting thing is now in the hotel industry also there are new jobs coming up which didn't exist before because of this digital transformation. What have you seen in the travel and industry of some certain new jobs that are being available? The reason I ask you is that we have regularly on our show, we have hotel school students, a master degree program students, and they always ask me the same question: what should I do? Well, I say, well, what's your passion? If you like, there are so many new jobs coming up in the industry, so you don't have to think that you should, if you don't have passion for cooking, there's other things you can do. If you love tech, there might be, or marketing, there's so many things you can do. Any advice you can share while we are sitting? I mean, you are sort of within Microsoft, and you may have some golden advice for these guys who are watching our show.
Well, number one, I've embraced technology, and dive deep into that world order. But I mean, when you think of data scientists, revenue managers, all that space on the front end of the journey of trying to drive, revenue into the hotel, trying to drive a more personalized experience for the consumer, I think those opportunities will continue to grow as the hotel companies get more entrenched in their data and their data skill sets. I think one of the areas I think is fascinating is around, again, this is more around driving proactive journeys for the consumer. I think in the area of social media, I mean, we have people who watch what's happening in, from hotel companies, community managers, but they're watching what's happening in Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and they're reacting to it. I think the hotel community needs to kind of turn the other way and move to more proactive versions of it, of creating these micro communities around content, kind of like what they do in the gaming space. If you think of Microsoft's own Xbox, and you think of kind of at the tip of the spear around digital engagement with consumer, it's the gaming industry. They do an amazing job of bringing someone into a bedroom, putting on their headset, engaging with individuals that they may or may not know, and then social graphing the network and figuring out who's the influencer, then how do I drive X, Y, and Z. So I think it's this idea of creating these micro communities based on needs and likes of individuals, and have community managers that are proactive in creating and nurturing those communities to help drive a better loyalty to specific brands. So lots of different opportunities. And then if you think of kind of some of the basic tasks, a lot of that will be automated. So, and then, but with that, where can I then be more forefront with the consumer who wants that personal touch to drive that more anticipatory service from them, from a, not from a digital perspective, but from a face-to-face perspective as well. Because the one thing you enjoy when you step in a hotel is not, are you checking in? It's, Mr. O'Flaherty, we've been excited to see you. Can't wait for you to enjoy this journey.
Yeah.
And that means a lot from an emotional connection. So I think creating the emotional digital connection, in addition to what they currently do an amazing job, is creating that emotional human connection. And how do you bring those two together?
Excellent, excellent. I just read somewhere that there's a hotel or company looking for TikTok officers, so the industry is changing around.
I know.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Yeah. All right. So let me get over to you, Abid. Thanks very much for those.
Sam, I thought you were going to say a hotel company is looking for a TikTok performer, and you've applied.
Yeah, I would.
But technology is changing. Shane, our industry is possibly one of the most fragmented industry. The brand is owned by somebody else. The asset is owned by somebody else. That's operated by somebody else. In operating in that environment, How do you convince all the stakeholders that embracing technology is the right thing to do, and the dollars and cents that typically are attached to it that are somewhat of a deterrent in this industry adopting technology, along with lots of other things? How do we overcome that hurdle?
That's the big challenge. From my days with Forbes Travel Guide and different areas, and then with Microsoft, it's because you have multiple parallel paths of the owner, the management company, the chain. It's like I kind of call it. I got a family with 5 kids. I call it a guided democracy. So we're trying to push all down the same path within the guardrails. But to your point, it's understanding, helping everyone understand that the investment you're making in technology is driving more operational efficiency. It's probably driving more energy efficiency in the property itself. But it's trying to get both on the customer side, the employee side, and then I'd call it the smart hotel side or the intelligent operations. How do you bring all of those together and guide? And it's a journey. But if you think of different areas, get smaller scale. If you think of the QSR space, they've done a great job. Quick service restaurants, they're, again, same model. To a certain extent, but it's on a smaller footprint. So how do you use some of the learnings from some of the other industries to help guide the hotel industry down the path? And, I think I'm optimistic, as I always am, for the industry as a whole to put their foot on the gas and accelerate and get everyone involved. But it is a challenging thing for the industry as a whole. And then I think also from the tech provider side, who've provided these solutions, these solutions need to be more open and sharing and the ability to connect with each other in a way that you can harness that data, hydrate the data, and then bring the data back in a meaningful way. But I think all the tech companies that are involved in the space and build solutions, they need to open up their platforms as well, which I think that many of them are doing, which they may have not done in the past.
Shane, one last question before I bring our next guest in. How during pandemic our entire work processes have changed. Everybody is working virtually. These virtual applications, not only in work environment, but how will it impact the business travel? What are your thoughts? Are people going to go back to quote unquote an office environment, or do you think it's working from home is the norm at this point?
Well, I think the concept of your home is your work cocoon, for lack of a better word, and then I think your office will become a little bit more like a beehive or collaboration center. And then to your point, we talked about earlier, many of these offices have closed to a certain extent. So then how can the hotel be that collaborative center for individuals who want to book a small meeting? It could be one of your day passes where I can get into the hotel, but how do we automate that entire process? So if I, am here in Chicago and I want to get my team together, both from a hybrid perspective and then in person, I'd like to automatically book that through a system right into the hotel. But today you have to actually pick up the phone for a group of 6 people, which is, that should be an entirely automated process where I can actually book a meeting room at a hotel for a couple hours. But I think long term, if you think of what Microsoft is and the tech companies are doing, we're trying to build we call it digital equity, where the online person, the offline person feel exactly the same. And that's the investment we're making moving forward. So as a hotel company, how do I, let's say in the meeting space, how do I drive revenue both from the physical person who is in my property, but then how do I also drive revenue from the digital person or the virtual person as part of these next generation hybrid meetings that are going on? So how do we be creative in that world order? How do we automate the process where it makes sense for small meetings, as an example? Because I think that's a big opportunity for hotels with some of the office space, people not going back to the office moving forward. But I do think that the COVID has kind of broken the back on in a positive way, that the employer now has a lot more trust in their employee to work from home. There's implicit trust now, when before it was like, not too sure if you're actually doing your job. And I think in the end, it's how can someone be the most productive person they can be? And then let's put them in an environment that works. And if it's their home environment, great. If it's a coffee shop that they enjoy the buzz, great, let's do that. But I think that trust in the employee has skyrocketed due to COVID, because they've had to trust the employee.
Great thought, Shane. Thank you. Please stay with us. We'll have you back in a moment. But at this particular point, I'd like to bring up Jordan Hollander, who is with Hotel Tech Report. Jordan obviously eats, sleeps, devours technology in different platforms from small to big. Jordan, thanks for your time. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-arrival travel planning and pre-arrival journey. How do you think that has evolved over a period of time? Certainly, the phone usage might have gone down, but the experience itself, is it really that much better today? Jordan, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Zoom problems. So when you're talking about the pre-arrival, are you talking about the guests planning on their own time and discovering local experiences? Are you referencing how the hotel is communicating with the guests prior to arrival? Which facet are you focused on?
From a hotel perspective, how is it the guests are communicating with the prospective guest, because they might not have made the selection? How do we convince the person that this facility might be best suited for them, and then delivering when they are on site? That would be the second phase, but mostly pre-arrival contact.
Absolutely. So when we look at like the guest discovery, guest journey, it's no secret, and Google's put out a ton of research on this. The average guest is looking at 30 to 50 websites before booking their travel. Many of those guests are starting on OTAs, narrowing down and shortlisting hotels, unless it's a brand that they're familiar with or know they want to stay at, or found a reference from a friend. So the big thing is having a fast, mobile optimized, easy to understand website. We see two mistakes here. We get lots of, one of the ways that we verify reviews and leads on Hotel Tech Report is looking at the hotel website and verifying identity. What I can tell you from looking at hotel websites every day is you would be shocked to find some of the websites that are out there. They're not mobile optimized. You really don't understand the product. It takes forever to load. And so the first problem is having antiquated software. Historically, the reason for this is, 10 years ago, if you wanted to get a great mobile optimized website, it would cost you about $18,000, with a budget provider charging around $2,000 to $3,000, which is out of the range, especially as you talk about a bit your former experience in emerging markets with lower RevPARs and ADRs. So it makes it really challenging to invest. The great thing about today is that there are tons of CMS or content management systems, both open source like WordPress, as well as some of the closed source like Book Assist and some of these other platforms that are specifically designed for hotels, and there's pros and cons to each of those. But the first piece is making sure that when that guest comes from Expedia, they discover your property, they go to your website, they understand what you do, you look like other hotel websites. And this is the other problem that we find with certain luxury brands on the other end of the spectrum, is they try to get too cute, too creative. Ultimately, we all browse the internet like sheep, like blind sheep, and we're just clicking around. Half the time we don't know what we click. Sometimes we fill out forms, we don't know what we're filling out. We're kind of in autopilot, we're busy with our daily lives. And so when luxury hotels try to put these fancy videos and animations on their website, the guest gets there and they're a bit confused as to what to do. The only things they really care about are location, like what's around this hotel. Is it convenient for the things that I want? If it's a business meeting, are there local restaurants that I could take my clients to that are going to be professional? If it's a romantic getaway, are there really cool, awesome romantic experiences around the hotel? They want to know, what do the rooms look like? How much do they cost? Am I going to get the room that I paid for? And then they also want to know about the amenities and the services. And so it's all about communicating those things in a really easy to understand way. And this is something that an advisor, I know Shane's out of Chicago, we used to work out of 1871, and the COO told us when we were starting our business, he's like, in the internet world, nobody cares about you. They're going through their day, they're in autopilot, and you have to stop them, grab their attention, and make it worth their while and make it easy for them. And that's where some of these luxury hotels fall short. So it's create a consistent, easy to understand experience where a hotel understands the things that they need instantly from your website. And guess what? There's some really low-tech ways of testing whether you're successful at this. Go into your local Starbucks or coffee shop, maybe a bit more difficult depending on where you are with COVID, or just go into your hotel lobby, show them your website, and just look over their shoulder and ask them to book a room, ask them to give you feedback, and you're going to get a lot of insights out of that. So that'll come back as a theme throughout all of this. Digital transformation, part of the digital transformation mindset and process is about technology discovery. So you want to be constantly demoing, trying new tools all the time, have to keep your existing vendors accountable and have to see what's out there. You don't want to be adopting these new tools that are like the next gen thing that's not really proven yet, and blockchain for hotels. Like, you don't want to implement this stuff right away. You don't want to be the first person on the wagon necessarily, but you want to know what's out there so that you are ready for it when the moment strikes. Like, it was a really bad idea for many people with their risk profile to invest in Bitcoin in 2016 because they didn't understand it. It wasn't proven. It wasn't at critical mass. But fast forward to 2019, 2020, Bitcoin has raised dramatically since the lows of 2017. But all of a sudden, you see the Vanguards and Goldman Sachs of the world investing in Bitcoin. Even though it's a higher price point, it's less risk. And so ultimately, the way that ties back here is you don't necessarily want to be the first person to adopt a new technology. But when you look at what Microsoft is doing with Teams, as Shane's talking about, or Microsoft Web Services, these are tried and true technologies that you need to adopt. And you may not have wanted to be the first person on the cloud because not all the PMSs had adopted yet, but it's time to start exploring that now. And you want to know what the next thing is, and just keeping touch with all the latest trends.
Well, Jordan, you are absolutely correct that you don't want to be, as a business, you don't want to be the first person trying out something new. But isn't that an inherent problem in our industry? We always wait for the next guy to try it out, and we'll be after that. By then, there's something new. That technology is outdated. We waited too long. We're still talking about computers that are being used at the hotels 7, 8, 9 years later, and we think that they should be okay to use. How do we overcome that? What's the best way to prepare for it?
Yeah, that's a great point. And so when you look at the last 15 to 20 years in hotels, let's go back to 1990. You're installing a new on-prem PMS. You're paying, let's say, $300,000 for a 3-year contract with some sort of lock-in. You have on-prem solutions and hardware on top of that and managed services. And so if you adopt that PMS, there's no way you're ripping that thing out and switching to a new system. And so the main innovation that's happened globally and what's caused software to eat the world is software as a service, and cloud has enabled that. And so when you look at adopting new technology today, it's actually not nearly as risky, or there's less of a commitment than there was years ago. And so an example, when you're talking about the pre-arrival experience and marketing in destination, tours and activities, amenities, et cetera, one of the massive technologies that we use at Hotel Tech Report for our business, every software company uses, and now a lot of the travel and hospitality companies are beginning to embrace, is live chat on a website. So the most important thing you can do when bookings are dropping off a cliff like they were during COVID, is you have to be able to improve the conversion rate of your website. And so one of the best ways to do that, and there's analytic solutions like Hotjar, where you can be constantly testing new button layouts and colors and optimizing in real time using data. But the best way that you can improve conversion is again, a really low touch solution, kind of like going to that Starbucks and talking to potential guests or prospective guests about your website experience and watching them, is you throw live chat on the site and you could see some of their buyer apprehensions. They could say, I got screwed, if it's your old company a bit at Banyan, I believe you're at, if they had a bad experience where they got switched into a lower tier room, even though they paid for a higher tier, or it was on like the borderline and they're skeptical about booking at Banyan again, and because of that, you can then hop in on live chat. You can overcome that apprehension and create an opportunity to surprise, delight, and get them to book. And so live chat is an example, to back to your question, of a solution that you throw a line of code on your website, you try it out. Let's say it creates too many tickets, you could start automating, or you could decide it's not right for you, and you could rip it out immediately if it's not the right solution. So again, I wouldn't have been the hotel to implement live chat 5 years ago, but this is a tried and true technology. We know how it works in other markets. We know our own business problems, and so it's safe to adopt today. And so when I say you don't want to be the first one to adopt a technology, at Hotel Tech Report, part of our ranking algorithm is having a minimum viability for a product. So we believe that there's extreme value in a tried and true solution. Warren Buffett says he invested in Coca-Cola because it's been around for 100 years, and it's highly probable that it will be around in another 100 years. You don't want to, it's really challenging to invest in a startup. And that's what you're doing when you pay for software. You're investing in the future of that business. it's really challenging to invest if you don't have certainty as to the future. And so what we say is you need to have a certain threshold of clients and proof of concept. And that startup, it's on them to get that proof of concept to give you confidence that you should adopt. And so there's certainly outliers and edge cases around that. And it's usually through relationships, whether it's through a venture investor that introduces a new client, or just a relationship of the founder. Most hotel tech companies are created by hoteliers for hoteliers. So usually they'll have those relationships to push out the initial proof of concept. And it's absolutely a great idea to try some of these things. If it's lightweight, low commitment, low cost, and maybe no cost for the pilots. But ultimately, again, going back to this idea that if a vendor asks you to lock into a 3-year contract and has massive price points, you are less likely, obviously, to try something like that. But if you're talking about live chat, some of these solutions for smaller properties in emerging markets could be $99 per month. And at Hotel Tech Report, we use about 50 different software tools to run our business. We like to think of each of our software tools as an employee that's doing a job for us. And so we automate a lot of the things internally. Live chat is a great example of this, and hoteliers should absolutely be trying these low-cost solutions and not necessarily be the first one to adopt it, but you want to vet and make sure that there is a proof of concept there and that you understand the risks that come with working with a newer company.
So, Jordan, I'll turn it over to Sam here in a bit, but one more question. Talk a little bit about the challenges. Obviously, technology is moving at lightning speed. It has become far less expensive than it used to be, but yet they are independent components, so almost like silos. Getting them into a network environment, particularly our industry that is so fragmented, even the business acquisition, you brought up OTAs, that's outside the hotel environment, and a lot of the information will not get to the hotel because data is money. Wholesalers, they retain a lot of the information. It will not get to the hotel. How do we get to a seamless operating environment that doesn't create frustrations, or it's not always about pointing fingers that, oh, no, it's not our software, it's the next guy?
Yep. So I think it ultimately comes to it's pretty much like any other supply chain challenge. And now hotels have become far too independent on the Expedias and Bookings of the world. It's no secret. But what happens when you have a concentration of suppliers? Well, they have pricing power and they have control over your business and they have all the leverage in that relationship. And so the best thing that hotels can do is focus on distributing that power across either more suppliers or more direct business. And so that challenge of Expedia wanting to own the data is likely to be there for years to come, unless that semi-duopoly is broken up. There's some really interesting ways for hoteliers to bring in some more distribution partners. So one being TripAdvisor's new Trip Plus program is really interesting to me. And basically the idea is a traveler pays a $99 annual fee and hotels list deals in there. TripAdvisor takes no expense and they get all the data that comes from TripAdvisor. So that's one really interesting channel that has scale that hoteliers can try. And they can start testing and seeing, okay, well, I can go back to my Expedia Market Manager with the bookings that came through Trip Plus, and now I can renegotiate and either lower my fees or shift inventory away from them and be less reliant. Another really interesting platform that's come up is called Impala out of London. So Impala is empowering hoteliers to create direct relationships with distributors who are more niche, and basically doing that without a GDS or an OTA relationship. And so it's allowing hoteliers to negotiate deals directly with some of those third-party partners. And again, some of these partners will require that the data stays internal, but at the same time, the hoteliers now have more suppliers to diffuse that third-party business amongst, and they can negotiate better terms. And this is a bit of a prisoner's dilemma. Ultimately, the hotel industry has to shift towards a mindset of a much more savvy and sophisticated distribution strategy than drinking everything from the OTAs.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for that. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you, Sam.
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in bots, and I've been playing around with bots myself on Facebook, and there are many things you can do with bots. What is your view? What would be solutions on utilizing bots in hotels, and and make them feel more human than they are at the moment, because there are some hotels who are using bots, and it's clearly know that they don't have not really figured out the best way to create that information for the customer, or maybe they haven't collected enough data. What are some challenges and maybe opportunities for hotels to smartly use a bot for their pre-arrival, for instance?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely application of bots across both facets, like the operations back office and the guest experience pre-arrival. In terms of making those interactions more human, it really comes down to the little touches. Don't write those, a lot of times you're going to be programming responses. If they say, what are the hours for the pool? You're going to have someone on your team or potentially the vendor that creates templates for those types of responses. Throw in some casual language. Like, we're in a world where there's full transparency, where we're all text messaging and using emojis. So there's little things that you could do to make the responses from those bots feel more human, even if it's just an emoji at the end of it, or writing as if you're writing to a friend. And this is like, this is pretty much par for the course. Even in software marketing, that was historically very stale and business focused, and it was like literally writing for computers. Now in B2B marketing, we're always talking like humans and making it casual and fun and adding some entertainment value in there. And you could even add GIFs, funny GIFs to create some personality. So that's where it really starts in terms of creating a more human experience. I don't think it's something that every hotel needs to do. I don't think the Days Inn Oklahoma needs to have necessarily a personal like fun brand to it. But if you're a quirky 25-hour bikini hotel in Berlin, you might want to infuse some of that personality. Now, when it comes to applications in the hotel industry, ultimately, like looking back at history, the last 20 years, obviously outside of valuations and the dip during the financial crisis, and then obviously regional stuff, it's been pretty easy to run a successful hotel. When you look at RevPAR growth, when you look at global travel demand growth, we've been swimming downstream. And so pretty much anyone, not anyone, but most can succeed in that environment if you're not over leveraged and if you're not shooting yourself in the foot from an operational efficiency perspective and you're being fiscally responsible. We're moving into a world where it's much more challenging and we're actually swimming upstream, and we've been swimming furiously upstream this past year. And so we need to get more efficient. The way that we get more efficient is by automating the small tasks. And so that's where bots come in. If you have a guest messaging platform like Whistle or Zingle, for example, what you're going to find immediately is that when it's easier for guests to communicate with your property, they're going to ask more stuff. And that's great. You want to get in front of guests. You want to be there to serve them. You want to make sure that there's those moments for surprise and delight, and they're not waiting on hold in their room or emailing you and waiting 3 days before they arrive. So those services are great, but you're going to have increased message volumes. And this is especially true when it comes to call centers at the Marriotts and Hyatts and Hiltons of the world. But ultimately, what you need to do is figure out what percentage of those queries do I actually need a human to respond to. And you're going to find that, it's Pareto, 80% of those inquiries or questions or requests are going to be standard. And you can template those responses, throw in those GIFs and emojis if you want to make it more personal. But that's where bots come in. And the other piece is you need to integrate with, for example, in stay and operations, you need to integrate with your service optimization software. So whether that's Core, Hotel Kit, or Hot Sauce, or any of these guys, your messaging software needs to integrate with those, so that if a guest says that the HVAC is broken in their room, your bot can then pick up, they can respond to that request and say, we're going to send an engineer down, integrate with Alice, for example, create a ticket, and then when that ticket is completed, route that back to the guest to let them know that the HVAC has been fixed in their room and they're all set. So this really comes down to this idea of APIs connecting all of our software. If you don't have the right connections, the bots are great and they can answer questions and they can take some of the load off your service team, but they only can go so far. So it's really about stitching all these different pieces of technology together. And I think it is a bit of a misconception in the hotel industry that we have too much technology. I think ultimately these technologies are low cost, they're super easy to connect to each other, and it just takes a little bit of strategic effort and planning ahead of time, and not just signing up with a new software because it's the cool new thing or because your old one broke or whatever. You need to think holistically, and that's what this digital transformation is all about in hospitality. It's starting from first principles. What do you want your guest journey and your staff journey to look like, and how does technology fit into each piece of that?
Yeah, good. Thank you. That's a great answer. A final question, and just if you can a little bit touch on this, is the blockchain, because it's been talked about with the cryptocurrencies and the blockchain developments and so on. At what stage are we in this development of implementing blockchain into the hotel industry, and where do you see it right now?
Yeah, so I think there's not too many interesting applications that I've seen yet. I think that the smart contract and blockchain as a technology has massive potential in hotels. This is just personal belief. I haven't seen any companies that have really successfully executed on this. The big areas where I think it's particularly compelling are first GDS. GDS is super inefficient, clunky, and ultimately it's a global supply of inventory. You need to track who owns that inventory or who's renting that inventory at a given time. I think GDS in the future with the right application can be completely rebuilt and optimized and lower cost of distribution for hotels using smart contracts. And I think the other piece that's really interesting is, the whole NFT movement that we're seeing now, non-fungible tokens, and just this idea of you own a piece. So it's decentralizing the ownership of companies. And so let's say it's like on the name B&B. So B&B is a cryptocurrency marketplace, and when the fees are taken from that, similar to the way that, or it's called Binance, similar to the way, so Coinbase is going to IPO soon. We all know this. Coinbase takes fees on cryptocurrency. Those fees are earnings that get distributed to their shareholders. B&B is different because they have their own currency that's used within the Binance network. And anytime a fee is paid to the Binance network, it gets distributed to the holders of BNB coin. And so the really interesting thing here is a shift of ownership and creating a currency where all community members benefit from the growth of a platform. And so I think, the reason I bring this up is I think there's going to be huge applications in hotel loyalty to basically decentralize hotel loyalty with some kind of currency. And so the issue with, when my Starwood points, my SPG points moved over to Marriott, everyone was like, oh, we're going to lose our points. They're going to get devalued. But if the members of SPG or now Marriott Bonvoy had skin in the game where every time a new booking came into Marriott, they could then benefit from that. And their points could actually become more valuable over time as the Marriott brand grows and revenue grows and profitability grows. You're going to see those loyalty programs have so much more stickiness because they're not thinking about how's Marriott going to try and screw me and take away 20% of my points this year because earnings are down. You're going to be thinking about how do I tell all my friends to go stay at Marriott because my points become more valuable when they do. So it's about this decentralization and community ownership that I think has the potential to disrupt the entire loyalty marketplace and hotel and shift the mindset from devaluation to increased valuation.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And let me hand over now to Abid for some final questions.
Thank you. Jordan, one more question before we bring in our next guest. Technology is wonderful. I, as a hotel owner, have no money. How do I bridge that? Because that inevitably, in every situation, that comes up. Too expensive, don't have the money. I've got to fix the roof and I got to fix the air conditioning. Forget the computer. We can do it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, so I think the first step is prioritizing your technology investments towards technologies that have a direct P&L impact that can come from increased revenue or it can come from decreased costs. So if you're really on a shoestring budget, the thing you want to do is focus on the fastest ROI. And you want to compare this capital project to your other capital projects like fixing a roof. If you have to fix the roof, what do you project the ROI is going to be from the 3 rooms that were disrupted? And does a new booking engine that increases your conversion rate by 20% on your website actually yield more benefit than that? And so I think the first thing is, instead of thinking about technology as a cost center, the shift and moving from CapEx to OpEx on most of these, even hardware like guest room tablets like SweetPad and Intelli, and those guys are on a SaaS model now, or Crave. You can now pay over time as a monthly fee with no install cost. So there is very low upfront cost that comes with a lot of these technologies. And so it's really thinking about them as investments in your properties. How much incremental NOI is this technology going to create? And how does that impact your hotel's valuation versus other capital projects? The other piece is, a lot of vendors did this early on in COVID. They gave extended free trials, payment forbearance. So having that technology strategy and getting on top of it now versus in 3-4 months, some of those vendors are still offering those terms. And so there's never been a better time to invest in technology than now.
Well, thank you for that, because that struggle, that fight for the same dollar that is being fought over by the engineers and by renovation people and sales and marketing, I think technology needs to really have a seat at the table, because it can make things better and facilitate the revenue generation, though it is still a tough sell. Please stay with us, Jordan. We'll have you back in a moment. At this point, I would like to bring up Stuart Greif, who is with Forbes Travel. Stuart, thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks a bit.
Stuart, talk a little bit about, particularly from a luxury market perspective, high touch market. Consumers can be rather fickle. How do we implement technology in that space?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think it's even broader based. It's not just luxury. So I think it's more heightened and accentuated luxury. And perhaps I could start by just sharing a little bit of our journey at Forbes Travel Guide, which I think is a parallel for that and the industry as well. So you couldn't think of maybe a more traditional business. We do two things. We rate hotels and we provide training on service excellence, how they can be their best. And we do focus more on the luxury end of the market. When COVID hit, much like a lot of the hospitality industry, we went and looked to say, how do we quickly digitize that which we can further? So our traditional training, we added virtual training because we couldn't travel. And we learned on its own that has its own unique value proposition. There was no reason we couldn't have done that in the years previous. And in fact, it's a complement, not a pure substitute for our traditional offerings, but that's really automating what you're already doing. I think when we step back and defined our mission, which is really that we champion, support, and celebrate those with a passion for service excellence, instead of narrowly defining it as, well, we rate and evaluate hotels and we do service excellence or what our products are. I think if the hospitality industry were to step back and look at their mission and where to meet the customer in their moment, as opposed to the specific technology, that leads you in more interesting directions. So for us, our digital transformation came with the recognition that there was this need around health security during COVID. And longer term, much like cybersecurity is not a one and done, whether we move from pandemic to endemic or the history of SARS and MERS and Zika, we know that health security is going to have an ongoing role. So we partnered with our sister company called ShareCare and developed something called the ShareCare Verified with Forbes Travel Guide, which is a health security attestation. Skift called us on track to be the hotel industry go-to safety standard. Now, if we said we just do ratings, we just do training services, we would have never kind of gone down this path. ShareCare, for folks who don't know, is a leading digital health company that's going public. The CEO, Jeff Arnold, founded WebMD. He is also chairman of Forbes Travel Guide. Oprah Winfrey is an early investor. And so the challenge is, if you're a consumer and you're looking to stay at one of your audience's hotels, or if you're a travel planner, a travel agency or advisor, how do you know where it's safe to go? If you think about just one hotel and all the safety protocols they have, think about the pages of documents and all the right things they're doing in the right way and how much they're investing in that. Now think of all the hotels in the world. You're literally talking about tens of thousands of pages of protocols. How can you expect any consumer, right, to be able, or advisor, to know who's doing the right things the right ways consistently? So we developed the only digital approach that provides ongoing operational attestation. We built it on Microsoft chatbots. So this is, to Sam's point earlier, and I think Jordan also mentioned when you talk about chatbots, this was a great opportunity. It took very little time, a couple months, to spin this up. And within 90 days, we were able to deploy this. We were in over 60 countries around the world in some of the top hotels. And we're very soon to some additional announcements in adjacencies and other spaces we're excited about, which will be coming in the coming weeks. But this provides kind of a globally consistent standard that's not point in time, that's kept current with science as it changes, as protocols change over time, and provides confidence to book and stay as a guest or a travel planner, as well as a marketing opportunity to help the industry come back to be able to advertise that. Now, that's an example of just how quickly technology, whether it's a chatbot or there are opportunities out there. And I think some of it is a mind shift, in terms of the industry. It's also providing that digital platform where, going forward, you then have the opportunity to serve other needs. So from our perspective, there's examples even before COVID. Melco in Macau, for example, the big gaming player, also built on Microsoft's chatbot to provide a digital concierge. And I think this is critical. You're talking about removing the transactional frictions, things that are really transactional, as Shane shared at the beginning, from the guest experience, where customers today don't want to have that, right? They want to have a better experience. So you can focus on the remaining touch points around personalization and better experience. And I'll just give you this one last example of it. So I booked just the other day for personal travel, a nice romantic weekend up in Napa Valley. And I wanted to follow on and reserve space at the lounge for a brunch after a 3 day weekend stay. I called the hotel's main number. I called the hotel at the top. It rang and rang and rang. There was nobody there, right? So the notion that somehow everything has to be a personal touch works until it doesn't, and then you have a terrible experience. So how much do I want to, right, after multiple calls, and not reaching even a chatbot that could have given basic information or come back? You have now, I think, technologies that are proven, to Jordan's point, out in the industry, where you're not being the first, that can really change and improve the experience. And I think some of it is a mind shift in terms of how we provide service and getting over this notion that, yes, it's antithetical to use technology in lieu of human interaction. But if human interaction or technology is something that creates a better experience, because that's where the world and that's where your customer is, if you don't do that, you're actually providing a worse experience.
Well, you are correct, Stuart. A lot of these bots and the automation has made life simpler, or at least it would have taken out some of the routine things. But I must confess, in all transparency, I have become to hate some of this technology because take out hotels for a second, because our adoption is very poor and it's not deployed very well. But some of the technological companies that have, whether it's internet service providers or phone services or you name it, that are in this sector, you get into the maze of getting a root canal done when you're trying to have a simple question answered, and it just is very poorly deployed. In hotels, we don't have it, so most of the time it's a ring, and you're on an eternal hold because there's nobody there to answer it. But is there a technology that works as opposed to technology for the technology? It's on set it and forget it type of attitude that most of the larger companies that even put together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There's a lot that's poorly executed, but the fact that in 2 months we put something together that works exceptionally well across thousands of touch points globally across 60 countries, that Melco implemented, I think, to Jordan's point, it's picking the right technologies, having the right prioritization. And my point is, you need to follow kind of where the needs are and consumers are, and where the ROI is, and find that interaction. I think technology too is it's enabling where consumers go. So loyalty and rewards, for example, right? This notion of Shane and I joke and sometimes refer to them as hostage loyalty programs, where I don't want to give up on the benefits. But there are two things. One is that younger folks in particular want to use their points differently. They may want to earn rewards where they can pay off a student loan or use it at a Starbucks. In fact, there's a company being spun out of the Intercontinental Exchange, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, called Bakkt, BAKKT. And I just put this out there neutrally. I'm not suggesting that they're the only one or that this is the go-to company, but they're enabling a digital wallet. Starbucks is a founding member of their exchange, and I believe Choice Hotels are another hotel chain is, where it doesn't matter whether it's a gift certificate, whether it's rewards even earned in online gaming like Fortnite or Robux, that you can have crypto, that you can actually go into your Starbucks and use airline or hotel points or anything else. So as points, that's an opportunity, I think, to lever technology to provide your customers with more uses in response for engaging with you. At the same time, it also ups the importance of creating a better on-property experience, right? And more personalization, because ultimately, if points become more commoditized over time, then what is it that distinguishes you or makes me, whether as a business or leisure traveler, want to stay with you? And so I think you need to be able to focus on the things that truly create that experience. And if I can take the transactional pieces off with technology that really don't add value to that and remove those frictions over time, then I'm going to focus more my people on creating something that's stickier. The scenarios that Shane shared with you at the beginning that make me feel you know me well. And I think it is also important to distinguish. There's been huge change, right, in the industry, and to the industry's credit, when you think about marketing or sales or distribution, things that are online, right? Right now in the past year, you can think of TikTok and Clubhouse as two new ways that marketers, can potentially be engaging with customers. A number of years ago, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and these were all new areas that you had to be able to engage and customers, around. And that didn't exist a number of years ago. When you come to the property, though, you start hitting capital frictions. You start hitting investments or operational training of staff or real world gravity of how you run a hotel to create that experience. So I think, there's a distinction there in the two. I think COVID brought forward some of the on-property digitization, right? Locks and doors. But at the same time, that customer data, especially first-party data now, is so key. And that's where a huge amount of investment in the industry is going and should be going, because you need to be able to bring your data together, as Shane shared, and action on it. It's going to be the basis of competitive advantage, in addition to what you uniquely do in your hotel environment to create the culture, right, and create an experience for your guests.
Stuart, you bring up a great point. The notion of loyalty in itself, I think, might be a bit dated at this point, because honestly, in the airline world and in hotel world, unless you are at the top of the pyramid where you would get some benefits, these points might or might not have any value to them, because you don't get any special treatment. There are thousands of people carrying all kinds of cards. So I don't know if that notion of loyalty is still valid today, but being able to use the points differently or gain loyalty differently might have a value. Amazon possibly knows more about us than we know about us. But hotel world, even though we have this massive database of hundreds of millions of frequent users, every time I show up at a hotel, I've got to go through telling my life story all over again. That here is my credit card and here's what I want. And even though I have said that all along, I have to go through that again. How do we break that logjam?
Yeah, it's kind of like they're welcoming you as if you're a longtime stranger to them. I think this, Jordan brought up a lot of great areas. We've seen in Shane's world in Microsoft, the rise of middleware and these micro apps. So the legacy systems, to Jordan's point, are so costly. They create such constraints. There's ripple effects to try to make changes. So what you've seen, whether, on the PMS side, I reckon you as an example, in the customer data platform side, I'd worked for Amperity for a little bit of time. That's a customer data platform that Wyndham Hotels and Resorts, their CEO, referenced them and their CMO glowingly, actually. The CEO during earnings, the CMO during the Skiff Forum. They also work with Starbucks, whose CEO is actually on the board of Amperity and Gap. And these are like 10x disruptive companies that don't make you have to rip and replace your existing systems, but are able, almost like that middle layer, to be able to, as Shane said, to kind of suck the data down and rehydrate it back up. They at scale, the technology is there today to bring huge amounts of first-party data, which especially with what's going on with Google and Amazon and cookies is so much more important, and connect data sources that you couldn't even have at scale to be able to do that and deploy it in ways that have huge benefit. So I think it's those types of players that are proven that, there are companies that are more forward-leaning in any industry, and in hospitality, you see some of them, and they're reaping the rewards. It might surprise people, especially given, we traditionally focus on luxury at Forbes Travel Guide, but our health security is across the entire industry and now adjacent industries. But Motel 6 has been incredibly innovative in technology. Their CIO, John Plant, has done some unique things. And so I think, Citizen M obviously has been trailblazing. I think it's also one of those mindset things that if we accept kind of the way the current spending is and the IT is and where everything is and the structure of the industry, we miss the opportunity to step back of where our mission is, where customers are, and then to Jordan's point of prioritization and where our ROI intersects and the long-term viability of our business, right? That's what, not doing that is what enables us to be disrupted by upstarts that come in and steal share and come into our space.
And we've had that happen to us multiple times. And unfortunately, I think a post-pandemic era, one more time, we might have that happen because external service providers and external technologies are progressing much faster than what we embrace. Stuart, let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I want to turn over to maybe the topic about staff training, since you're also involved with staff training. How do you best train staff in a very high turnover industry? And considering now we have, at some points, we have bots who are taking care of the jobs that used to be taken care of by persons and so on. But what are your views now about what has changed about training, or is it still the same way as we know it has been done before?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. And I think it might actually shock everybody who's watching this and in the industry, right? To actually know that right now, even as in the US and parts of the world, people are coming back from the pandemic, that there is an acute shortage. People cannot find staff. During the downturn, right? People that were in hotels, whether they were in housekeeping or concierge or front desk, have many people moved on even into areas like Amazon, where wages may be slightly higher. And so this notion of, I think we're going to have, even in a very positive way, there's been a huge lift in employment and people are coming back and things are starting to open up, even as there's still some variance. So I don't want to, I want to recognize there's still some challenges ahead, but the trend is in the right direction, that we're going to have this huge swath of people coming in that to be trained. And what it's going to mean is service is actually, as demand comes on, like, huge, as pent up demand is coming back, getting the staff back and the service levels, I think, are going to suffer. So traditional training, I think, serves an important purpose. We're obviously in that business. But if you think about longer term, let's just say, what would you want to have happen X number of years down? So let's say I got to my room and I got a text from you as my hotel that said, "Hey, how was your check-in experience, Stuart?" And I was like, "Hey, it was great. But you know what? The person at the front desk didn't recognize, that I've been here, so many times during the year, or, maybe they didn't use my name, when they engaged me." Wow, wouldn't it be great if in a very constructive way, that customer feedback from that texting app or that CX feedback then went into the ability to push nicely to that staff member the next day or even later in the day pre-shift. "Hey, we noticed that some guests have been mentioning X, Y, and Z, or, here's a couple quick tips. Here's a short video on the importance and the value of using the guest name. Why don't you try that in the next shift, et cetera, et cetera." So I think there are trends of micro learning, things that can be pushed through like Microsoft Teams as an example, where you can have video, little snippets. There are platforms in other industries today that wrap social media aspects. So I could post as a staff member, here's a video of me welcoming a guest, and have my colleagues put comments like a social network on it. The ability to include elements of gaming and competition in a very positive way to gamify and make it more engaging for staff members to get around. There's one other, area that I would also put a focus on, which is that notion that, training something that you do continuously over time. And it's more of a daily discipline than the kind of one and done. Both are important. It's important to have those big inspirational kind of reminders and great training and at key moments when you're opening a hotel, et cetera. But I think that the future increasingly will have this tech-enabled complement that becomes more part of daily life and integrated more into hotel operations. I can't tell you if that's 2 years or 10 years, but I believe that is the direction we should be heading.
Very good. We have a question from one of our viewers, Smita Parmar. What should we be teaching students at the hotel management institutes that prepares them for the digital wave in the hotel industry?
The short answer is yes. That's absolutely something that should be. I know that's not responsive directly to the question, but that is, I think, that is the insight. Whoever put that forward, kudos and tip of the hat. That should be an integral part of core curriculum, not only a basic understanding of the core systems and technology, even if you're not going to be a technologist, if you're going to be a GM, if you're going to have a corporate role, if you're going to be in marketing in particular, that should be a core part of the curriculum. Starbucks, I mentioned their CEO is on the board of this company Amperity that's disrupting, has like a 10x better solution around customer data and how they resolve identity of first-party data. What's interesting is Starbucks, when they went to hire a new CEO, right, they didn't hire another coffee guy or gal, right? They hired somebody who was digital and technology. Now, I don't mean every CEO or our industry, or because I have a bias, should do that. It could be the number 2 person, right? There needs to be a partnership at a leadership level that says every company, and think about how much we talked about marketing or sales or the internet or TikTok or any of these things. The CMO tenures now is the shortest of any chief executive because of how quickly consumers, right, and business people too are changing in terms of their digital footprint. So I think it absolutely should be a core part of curriculum. It should also be part of that corporate training and learning, right, in delivering service. And it should be a big part, I think, overall of the industry, the same way Starbucks recognized that in the coffee business.
Very good. Well, thank you, Stuart. And back to you, Abid, for any final questions.
Sam, I'm going to continue the conversation with Stuart, but let's bring everybody in. We are running short of time, so please bring everybody in. Stuart, talk a little bit about some of the innovations on property in the guest room that recently have transpired within the hotels. I know we all changed from the tube TVs to flat screens, but that was a given, I think. What true technological innovations have transpired in the guest room?
Yeah, I'll share 2 perspectives, and then I think Jordan and Shane probably have some great insights here. First of all, I think there's a greater degree of personalization, integration of IoT and data. It's nascent, it's starting, it's not fully manifest yet, but it's moving in the right direction. I would also say broadly, it's not just the room, but in the hotels, wellness overall as a trend is going to be a much bigger part. And when I say wellness, originally it used to be spas and maybe a yoga mat, and maybe there was granola, on the menu. And that evolved even before COVID, right, to sleep quality, science behind that. And that was starting to be integrated in elements of the hotel room, to your question a bit. And now I think post-COVID, people are recognizing there is this larger need around lifestyle, around elements of a stay, anxiety, wellness, meditation, that it's much more expansive. And I think hotels, not just the brands like a Hyatt maybe that have an explicit wellness focus, but as consumers, as business travelers, I think that's going to be a much bigger part. And there are elements in the hotel room, as well as in the types of services provided, even up to and maybe overlapping a little bit with healthcare. And it's not just health security that I'm talking about. I'm talking about in a proactive way of how do you make healthier choices when you're traveling as a road warrior, if there are road warriors still, which I believe there will be, but even as a frequent business or a leisure traveler, to make choices that have health and wellness. And I do think longer term, you're going to see health insurance companies provide incentives to do that. I don't think it'll be prescribed. I don't think anybody is going to heavy-handed do that. But I think that element of how you extend that wellness more broadly into people's lives will continue to expand from where we are.
Thank you for that, Stuart. Jordan, maybe next question to you. Sam-Erik had brought about the training. I know in my past life we were daring to go to a new generation property management system. Quite honestly, it had all the whiz-bang stuff, all the bells and whistles you could possibly ask for, except it was not, the distribution of that system in the industry was not very much. So all of a sudden, the training and onboarding of users became a hugely big issue. I don't know if our certain providers of this technology, if they have gone to simpler ways to train people, because our industry is notorious for high turnover. But if you have a different system that I've got to train people on, all of a sudden that adds to the time. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. Do you mind if I just add on to what Stuart was saying? I think there's a couple key elements that are super critical in in-room entertainment, and then I'll hop into this. Is that cool? I'll make it quick.
Please.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to say, obviously Shane and Microsoft, the explosion of Xbox and PlayStation and gaming has gone mass market. So one thing that we see a ton is guests having trouble connecting gaming systems or bringing their systems to hotels. Hotels don't necessarily need to provide those, but they should have a couple on hand. That's a great idea for the guests in that segment. It's something you can market on your website, but making it really easy for guests to understand how to connect their gaming systems to the hotel Wi-Fi so they can play some of these massive online games. I'm a huge gamer, play Call of Duty every day with a lot of my clients at Hotel Tech Report, which is awesome. So making gaming really easy and making it a great experience. The second point is think about how guests are being entertained at home, and that this kind of dovetails from the gaming. Guests are using streaming. They don't want to do pay-per-view. For the most part, don't want DirecTV or any of these normal OTT providers. They want to stream their own content. They're already paying these subscriptions. Give them an easy way to do that in room. You could do that with some Google solutions. You could do it with Concierge has a great solution for Apple TV for hospitality, modified for the hotel room, integrates with the PMS, logs out accounts when guests leave automatically to make sure that there's security, and also has a lot of features built on the front end that are customized for hospitality to market amenities and actually create new interaction experiences where guests can communicate and message with the hotel from that Apple TV experience. So there's some really cool options there, and Seo is another provider that's pretty big with the brands it's worth looking into. And then back to your question about the PMSs, I go back to the same idea of testing a hotel website at your local Starbucks and just watching someone over their shoulder. When you bring on a new employee who's not super experienced in hospitality, have your newest employee or your least senior employee try the new PMS without any training before you sign up with it. So, we're in a world where technology is super intuitive. Basically, a baby could pick up an app, an iPhone and figure out how to make their way around. Your hotel technology and B2B vertical market software should be as close to that experience as possible. Now, if they don't know what a room block is, it might be hard for them to figure out how to do it on your PMS. But ultimately, the basic functions of a PMS, for someone who has a little bit of experience, they should be able to pick it up quickly. Our clients, especially during COVID, have gone fully remote with their deployments. So you could sign up the same way that you and I would sign up for MailChimp and start sending an email newsletter about hospitality technology. Hotels can now sign up with a PMS like Muse or Cloudbeds Online, fully remote deployment, fully remote training, have a lot of great resources and customer support to get the employees who may not be as tech savvy there. But ultimately, it comes down to, before you bring on a new solution, make sure that it's usable, usability, ease of use in an industry that has super high turnover. And as we look at, the major trends this year, we look at early retirement. So the veterans kind of getting pushed into early retirement. We look at a lot of the staff on property, and there was a huge shift from, I remember, Hilton into Instacart drivers. So you're looking at a lot of the trained workforce, especially on these PMS systems, that's actually left the industry. You're going to have to bring new people in who are on TikTok and these other platforms and using really easy to use technology every day. Make sure that whatever solution you bring in is going to be easily ramped up with those people, because it's a guarantee that you're going to have high turnover, whether you're in San Francisco with union costs rising and needing to bring in a new workforce or shift people into new roles. This is a constant. The high volatility and the high turnover in hospitality is a constant. And so make sure that you have a system that can handle that and is not going to take 3 months for one of your associates to figure out.
Thank you for that. Shane, Microsoft is a household name. So everybody understands, at least the consumer-facing products, everybody understands what they are, everybody's comfortable with it. Having said that, I can speak for myself. A software package like Excel, I think I only use 20% of the capabilities that the software provides. I'm going to continue on with this training component. How do we facilitate that, whether it is the property management system, whether it's back of the house system or point of sale system or customer relationship management? I think training still has a huge work to be done where people will feel comfortable getting across different platforms.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's critical and important. And I think what we're seeing, I mean, and I guess I'm going into different areas or different spaces, but this concept of, we call it mixed reality. So it's kind of your real world blended with holograms. And so putting on a headset, you can walk the room. And so as an example, they do pre-pilot training. So it's, I can put this headset on, I'm inside a cockpit, and then I'm doing everything with my hand movements, exactly what procedures I need to get in part of their training. So I think this concept of where it's going around mixed reality, which is how do I, whether it's I'm typing and it's showing up what's in my system and it's my virtual typing as opposed to my physical typing. So I think mixed reality combined with this snack size content of information that's very, that people can learn fairly quickly. And I totally agree with Jordan. If someone can't do it in the first minute, then it's probably not the technology that you need. So again, everything that is created is really to make it, and I think we've reached an inflection point where in the past I think humans had to adapt to technology, and now it's flipped where technology is adapting to humans. So it's taking that inflection point and turned around. So if it's not easy to use on the front end, it's probably not the right product for me. But how do I deliver content in micro kind of transactions of content to help someone understand it in a very quick way and move forward? And if they can't really understand it that quickly, there's probably something wrong with the content, because humans are really able to grasp information in a very meaningful way fairly quickly. So that ability to move in that direction, I think, is important. And that ability to train either through your mobile phone, that people can train anytime, anywhere on their dime, as opposed to having them go, formal settings are great, but also reinforcement learning when the trainer is not there, I think is critical moving forward. And then this Uber economy of the gig economy of basically the ability where I'm working at a hotel, but I'm doing this on the side too, to garner better, more wages for myself. I think that ability to transcend each different industry, I think, is important too, using training tools.
I recently heard a comment that the world has been created and developed over these hundreds of years for human beings. Technology needs to adopt that as opposed to recreating the world. And as long as we keep that in mind, I think the adoption and acceptance of technology possibly would be far better rather than having to retrain everybody. Gentlemen, one somewhat controversial question, and Shane, if you don't mind, your thoughts on vaccine passports, the application. Will it take on? Will it help us? Or is it more of a hurdle?
Well, I think we believe that, and this goes all the way through like what we call a decentralized ID. So it's my ID that I own my information, whether it's health information or financial information, or everything like that, but I should control my universe. And we think directionally that's where Microsoft is headed. And we want to ensure that there's open data sharing platforms with common data models that we're all using on a global basis. We don't want proprietary systems. But again, we're all about getting people to travel again. Corporate travel, leisure travel, and I think we want to ensure that there's an institute called the Vaccine Credential Institute, which we think is kind of the core. It's an open data sharing, or it's using the FHIR health standards for the globe. So the more countries we can get to adopt that and create this open data sharing platform that's open and not proprietary. And then if certain countries require health passports or vaccine information, whatever it is, or credentials, positive, negative COVID, whatever we'll do to make people travel more. But it's, to your point, Abid, it's very controversial because of privacy issues. So how do we find that balance moving forward to ensure that that data that is passed on is just, it's either a green light or it's a red light, and none of my data behind it is passed on to the third-party providers at all, and it's all held within my world.
Fair enough. Stuart, any further thoughts on that? And there are multiple levels. Domestic travel would be one, and then you incorporate the international trips, so it makes it even more complicated.
Yeah, I think you're going to see it adopted in certain very specific use cases. So cruise lines, given the uniqueness of that experience, I think initially that's going to help them come back more quickly. And to the industry's credit, they've been doing a tremendous job leaning into that. I think international travel, and you may have certain destinations where certain governments determine that's a requirement to allow folks from overseas to come in to keep their own populace safe, right? So I think you're going to find cases of that. And then I think in a positive way, not to keep, because I can't see hotels turning away, guests, especially in this economic environment, right? Saying and putting a hard requirement. The same way I think with employees, you're going to see incentives provided constructively to incent people. There may be unique experiences that are only open to a subset. They might be smaller in scale. And then I think, like mass, it's become, unfortunately, a little bit of politics, regardless of which side you sit on it. So you look at companies like Krispy Kreme that provided free donuts for flashing your passport. So I think there's going to be, for those cases that need to adopt it sooner, the kind of high cost, high tech integrated solutions. But I think there is some utility to a low tech solution that enables folks, without sharing PII per se, to be able to have a digital passport for a variety of use cases, many of which may be proactive. And there's a lot of creativity out there, but I don't see it as on a larger scale standing in the way domestically, if you talk about the US, or maybe within another country, standing in the way of turning away all sorts of business, unless the government decides that is a priority for that country.
Fair enough. You bring up a great point about Krispy Kreme. I love those donuts, and I was joking around with somebody that maybe the insulin manufacturers are sponsoring that, so we will have overcome one thing into the other. Jordan, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, losing a headphone here. I don't think that hotels should be too worried about vaccine passports. In my opinion, I think the implementation is going to happen at the flight. Flights or trains where you're moving in between destinations. I think ultimately it comes back to everything that we've talked about, over the last hour. Hotels need to be ready and flexible to adopt to whatever the changing standards are. So if, your local DMO says that you need to split your hotel, that there's 20% of travelers that won't have vaccines that will opt out, and you need to have a section for 20% or a floor for non-vaccine travelers, you need to, it's not about adopting a new technology for this. Your PMS provider should be able to easily add a checkbox into the check-in process and block out rooms for non-vaccine guests. And so I think it comes down to that level of flexibility, which is really just a checkbox within your existing system. So as you should be keeping a pulse on local market regulations and compliance procedures. Do you have to show documentation to your local government that you're complying with these standards? Keep abreast of that and keep in touch with your vendors and make sure that they're building the feature functionality that's able to support you on that. And so, having a cloud-based provider with a really good user interface, it's not going to be a problem to add that checkbox the same way that they have passport scanning in most of these PMS systems. So it should be really straightforward and just keep a pulse on both of those. But again, ultimately, I think that if Dubai tells the world that travelers can't come in without a vaccine passport, or Israel, since they're so far ahead, then those travelers won't be there and hotels don't need to worry about it. And so I think ultimately it's not really in the hoteliers' hands, but they do have a responsibility to keep abreast of that, the same way that we all keep abreast of changing tax regulations for our own businesses.
Fair enough. Well said. Sam, I know there has been a lot of engagement online. Is there anything else? I just have one last question, and we can close the show unless there are questions that our viewers might have.
Well, I'd like to, in fact, give a shout out to Smita Parmar. She is teaching at Digital Marketing and Communication as a module at IHM Aurangabad in India. So she's been very active on the show. So a big shout out to IHM in Aurangabad in India, who is one of the viewers from our show, and I'm sure we have also some students who are viewing this. So, there hasn't been any other questions. So if you have any final point or any final question you have, Abid, please go ahead.
So one last thing for our panelists, with augmented reality and technology taking a hold of our everyday life, now with virtual working environment, are we about to embark on augmented reality virtual vacation? Is that where we headed? Is holodeck about to be introduced in our life? Shane, if you wouldn't mind going to that.
On a personal opinion, no. No, I want to go somewhere. I want to leave the confines of my home, and I think I can only play a video game for a certain period of time. But no, I mean, people love people. People love experiences, and we're by human nature, we're experiential. So the technology will be used for certain ways. Will it drive the sale of a timeshare? Potentially. But from developing a unique experience for me from a human perspective, I need to get on the road and see the beaches and see the world from a cultural perspective as well, embed myself in the local environment.
I'd like to add on to Shane's point. So I agree with him, but I think there's it will enlarge opportunities to expose those to travel who can't, whether it's economically, that ignites their passion longer term, whether it's in schools growing up to view and go to the Acropolis in Greece because they can't travel there and view history and illicit interest, or whether it's people that are beyond a certain age or stage of life to be able to experience travel virtually or in places that are unsafe to go. I have great memories of Shane and his colleagues sharing HoloLens with me, where I got to give my father a gift who is handicapped and can't get around, of using a HoloLens to become an astronaut and see the Earth and universe as people experience it from space. So, I'm not sure if Virgin Galactic will get there first, but Shane and Microsoft have already been there. So, as has my father.
Well, great thought, Jordan. Anything to add to that, Jordan?
I personally think it's inevitable that virtual reality will become hyper realistic, and it's still early days. And I think that there will be a point when virtual reality is equal to our human experience in many respects. And so there are going to be some experiences that are going to be better suited in person. If you're I'm a big surfer, so if I'm going on a surf trip, there's not much that virtual reality could do for me. I can look around on the wave, but it's not a real experience. But if it's if it's a sales meeting and I'm shaking hands and sitting in a room and having casual banter, I think those are things that right now, maybe Teams has a little ways to go before we get that full human experience. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to creep up real quick on us. And there's this we're moving towards a Ready Player One world, and so there are going to be a large majority of experiences that are equal in virtual as they are in the real world, and then there's some that really can't be replicated.
Well, Jordan, next time you want to go on a virtual surfing trip, let me know. I'll hire somebody with a bucket of water to stand next to you and will enhance your experience. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Shane O'Flaherty with Microsoft, Jordan Hollander with hoteltechreport.com, and Stuart Greif with Forbes Travel Guide. It's been a fabulous conversation. We never have enough time to continue on, but thank you for spending the time with us, and thank you for sharing your insights. Sam.
I want also just a final note on the augmented reality. A friend of mine, and shout out to Jayant Kola in India. So he has a dream that when he enters a hotel room that he will see Jon Snow from House of Thrones. So he believed that one of these days they will not be as clunky, these hardware, so he can have a more pleasurable experience. But I think it's going to be coming one of these days. But yeah, I'd also like to thank the panelists. It's been a great discussion, and I learned so much already. And we had also Smita Parmar has been very grateful for the conversation and has also give kudos to everyone who has been participating in our discussion. But also now for the replay viewers who are watching this later on, thank you very much for joining us. And also we have a podcast, Hospitality Talks. So if you like to listen to this podcast while you're jogging, it is a great opportunity to listen to the whole show. It might be a little bit long for some people. We are 1 hour and 40 minutes, but not too long for us who are here on the show itself, but it's understandable. But these words, thank you very much, and I look forward to, with Abid, to see you in our next episode. It's going to be very soon again. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.